Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we are going to Austin, Texas, and we're going to discuss public relations. And the fun part about this week's public relations conversation is that it's going to be about a number of different industries. We're going to talk public relations in sports and in baseball, but also in the corporate world, internal communications. And I'm really excited about this week's episode because for the first time, instead of talking to a computer screen via Zoom, I'm on location in person. Our guest is Jill Cacic. She's from the class of 2009. Welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so here is literally Dell Diamond in Round Rock, Texas. For those of you who don't know, that's a little bit north of Austin, about 20 minutes if there's no traffic. Jill just probably did like 45-minute drive to get here. Jill used to work for the Round Rock Express. That's the Texas Rangers AAA affiliate. We're going to discuss why she worked in baseball, why she left in baseball. Now she is the Senior Internal Communications Manager for OHO Labs. And so I'm just really excited, Jill, that we can have this conversation so that we can let our students know about the pros and cons of working in sports and the pros and cons of working in the corporate world. And, you know, sometimes it can be really exciting when your school goes to the Final Four and has a buzzer beater to get to the national championship game. But at the same time, working in sports is very long hours, and it's weekends, and it's nights, and it's holidays, and it can really take a toll. And I have a feeling that we're going to talk about work-life balance a lot throughout the course of this podcast. All right, so let me shut up and start letting you talk. Let's go back to San Diego State, because you were kind of on this path, right? You worked as a student assistant in media relations. You worked at the mighty 1090 radio station. Tell us about when you were in college, what did Jill Cacic want to do with her life?
Yeah, I initially wanted to be the next Erin Andrews. I wanted to get into broadcast journalism for sports. And I started actually talking to some people and found out that PR, media relations for sports, was a job path, a career path. And so my initial desire to get into sports journalism led me to an internship with XX 1090 back in the day. And I started as a promotions assistant, going on site to remote broadcasts and putting up the banners and all that. And worked my way up while I was still in college to a full-time position there. And then started transitioning and realizing I actually wanted to do the PR side of things and work for a team instead of for a media company. And that led me to an internship with San Diego State's athletic department, which I highly recommend. Running stats, transcribing post-game quotes, and just doing a lot of the grunt work that you need to do when you become a one-person show, when you make it to the mighty minor leagues. And so it really prepped me for my first position outside of college.
What did you think in terms of, am I going to do this the rest of my life? Did you think that you were going to be a lifer?
100%, 1,000%. My goal was to make my way up through the minor leagues, make it to the major leagues. I wanted to run stuff for a major league team, for a communications department.
Why baseball?
I am a baseball junkie. I grew up on the sport, huge Dodgers fan growing up in a suburb of LA. Went to opening day every year for as long as I could remember. It was what my family did. I grew up on the sport, so it was a no-brainer. I was a stat nerd. I loved everything about the sport.
Okay, so you worked in minor league baseball. Huntsville Stars for 3 years, the Round Rock Express for 5.5, basically 6 years. Before we get too heavy into minor league baseball, you and I know this really well, but I understand that most people listening to this have no idea about minor league baseball and what it means and what it doesn't mean. I'm constantly amazed at how many people who work in college athletics have no idea what minor league baseball means. And so the most important thing, which is really where PR and marketing comes in, is that as the minor league baseball team, you do not control the roster. You are affiliated with a major league team. My team is the Albuquerque Isotopes. We're with the Colorado Rockies. The Round Rock Express here, where Jill worked, is with the Texas Rangers. And so the Rangers send you the players, they send you the coaches, they send you the trainers. And then the minor league team does everything else. They provide basically the business element. They provide the field and the groundskeepers and the ticket sales and the marketing and the video board and the PR and the broadcaster. They basically handle the business side. And so most of the time when you're promoting sports, PR or marketing, you want to highlight the stars. Hey, come see Shohei Ohtani. Come see Steph Curry. But in minor league baseball, you don't know the roster until a few days before the season begins. And then if anybody is playing really good, they're probably going to go to the major leagues. So inform our audience as PR/marketing/social media, the creativity that it leads to when you have no control over your players or your coaches or your win-loss record.
Yeah, creativity is a great way to describe it, because I can't tell you how many times I would have interviews lined up with a player who the next day I would get notified that he was getting called up to the major leagues, and there goes your whole interview and your story. So then you're scrambling to figure out, okay, I have a camera crew coming, I have to pitch them another good story. And so it's whether that's talking to the players and coaches to see what's another good story that you can tell, figuring out what's going on around the ballpark. Are there new concession items or new promotions? Is there a fan celebrating their 1,000th consecutive game at the stadium? You have to really get creative and dig to figure out what's another story that I can give these people that are coming to cover us. And it has to be quality. You can't just throw them garbage. It has to be another good story that they want to run with. And so that's really where that creativity comes out. But you're talking to the players and coaches and seeing, or even if you're looking at the roster of the visiting team, is there someone who has a connection to Round Rock or Austin that is a good story to share? And then you're just hoping that next person is also available to tell their story.
Yeah, another side note, someone might say, hey, I want to go talk to this player, and then not only are they going up to the major leagues, but it hasn't been announced yet, and so now you have to find a creative way to not blatantly lie, but kind of lie, because you're not supposed to tell people just yet, and so that always becomes a very creative way as well.
Yes, it was exaggerated truth. It was this player's not available, and I cannot tell you why. Right. And a lot of times you build these relationships with members of the media, and it's a nod and a wink, and they understand what's going on, and there's that mutual trust where they're not going to say anything, but they're also disappointed because they wanted to get this star player before they go up to the big leagues and become a big thing in Dallas for us, for the Round Rock Express. And so it was getting creative, finding those ways to be like, hey, not this, you can't tell this story, but I have this story you can tell. And it also set you up to think on your feet. These things are happening in real time. You might be getting ready for a game, and there's an injury at the major league level, and an hour before the game, a player gets called up because they're needed with the big league club, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, okay, now I don't have time to think of what else am I going to do. Let's pull something out of my back pocket and we're running with it.
I like to say that I want our students at San Diego State to understand the pros and cons of different things. I don't want to scare them away from an industry, but I also want to make sure that they know what they're getting themselves into. So as we are recording this, it is 3 o'clock. The people who succeeded you have been here since 10 a.m. They're probably going to be here until 11 p.m., if not longer. There's very few people here. There's some players who are playing catch with the football. They're getting ready to stretch. They've already been doing some work on the field. The groundskeepers have been here since early in the morning. I arrived about an hour ago for a game that starts at 7 o'clock. Let our students know, what is a day in the life like for a PR person who works for a minor league baseball team when the team is home?
You better like coffee. No, it does start early for the PR department. I would usually get to the ballpark around 9 o'clock, between 8 and 9 for a 7 o'clock first pitch. And that my day would start with running stat packs, which is about 20 pages. I hope they're still the same. You have them right in front of you.
Yes.
Yep. It's about 20 plus or minus pages of statistics that cover the last night's game, teams around the league, monthly stats, just a whole breakdown that's helpful for the coaching staffs. Gosh, and then it was off to the races of putting together game notes. And game notes are usually a smaller packet of information that pertains to that night's game. You're looking at the breakdown of the pitching matchup. You're looking at any special stories that are coming up. Is a player on a hit streak? Is a player coming close to breaking a record? Or they're just fun stories between the two teams that you want to share. And then it was as the teams would start showing up, and you would meet with the coaching staffs and get the breakdown for the night, make sure that the pitchers that you have are both scheduled to start, nothing's going on there, start collecting lineups, putting all that together to distribute to members of the media up in the press box, setting up the press box, coordinating any pregame interviews that were happening. Gosh, it was a lot of running around, putting out fires, because nothing ever went according to plan. It truly is. There are a handful of occupations you can say this about, but especially working in PR and especially sports PR, when you show up to the ballpark every day, you have no idea what that day is going to entail. And you can't even fathom some of the stuff that you're going to run into. And you deal with it. It's part of the job.
When you're in the major leagues, most Major League Baseball teams have a PR staff of roughly 4, and then they usually have, they've now separated social media and media relations. So there's usually anywhere from 1 to 3, sometimes 4 social media. And then there's the marketing staffs. At the minor league level, like Jill, you would have a seasonal intern who would be there for 8 or 9 months. So you're basically a one-woman band who's getting some help from someone who has a little bit of experience. You're in charge of helping that person get more experience and take more off your plate. So the point is, you're wearing a lot of different hats. And, when it comes to like the Venn diagram of marketing and PR and social media and media relations, they overlap a ton in minor league baseball.
Yeah, they really do. And it's, we had a pretty robust staff at the Express when I was there. And so marketing, I helped with marketing, but we really had like a marketing team that ran a lot of those things. But to your point, you would put on the mascot suit on some days because you just needed extra hands to do that. And a lot of that does combine. You are doing PR and marketing and promotions. And even though, like I said, we had a great marketing team that was involved, from the PR side, I would sit in on our marketing meetings and help brainstorm theme nights and stuff like that. So it wasn't just, there's no stop line to where your job duties stop and another start. There was a lot of overlapping, and you wore a ton of hats. And again, like, you never knew what role you were going to have to fill when you got to the ballpark that day.
What are some of your favorite memories, your most cherished memories of working in minor league baseball, working with guys who either made it to the big leagues or didn't make it to the big leagues? What are your favorite moments?
I think from the player side, one of the things that never got old was being back in the clubhouse when a player was notified they got the call. They were going up to the big leagues. That was just like seeing someone reach their dream and achieve their goals. I get chills now thinking about it. It's just the coolest thing. Other than that, I think one of my most memorable games, we did a princess night at the ballpark, and there was a meme going around of a little girl that dressed as a hot dog for her dance class, for Princess Day at her dance class. So I came to the ballpark dressed in a hot dog costume. And there are a couple of pictures of me. There's one of me sitting in the dugout. I had 2 phones at the time, and I'm like on both of them in a hot dog suit, just like straight face. And another, I'm talking to our pitching coach, getting our pitching matchup or rotation for the next series, and just again standing stone face in the middle of the field in a hot dog costume, like talking shop. And it's just stuff like that. Like it is so much work, and the days were so long, but you had fun like that. Mm-hmm. Like it was appropriate to do those things, and it was fun.
It is fun. And when people think about minor league baseball, you hear these expressions about it's a slice of Americana. I've read once where someone said it's like walking into a Norman Rockwell painting, and it's intimate and it's quaint, and there's little league nights and there's teacher appreciation nights, and there is an intimacy because it's not 30,000. It's hopefully 5 to 10,000, depending on the day of the week, where you really get to know these guys and see them being really silly right now as they practice football, even though it's a baseball team that they're out there. Now let's get to the butt side. The nights, the weekends, those long hours, pulling the tarp, being a member of the grounds crew. What were some of the things that started to wear on you that made you think, maybe I'm not going to be a lifer?
Yeah, it really was the work-life balance for me. I think I was very fortunate that I got started in baseball when I was young, and I was able to put in the time that was required of my role. And to that extent, too, not every role is as time-consuming as a PR media relations role. We just drew those lucky straws, and that's what we got. But for me, it was nights and weekends. I was missing out on big life events for my friends and family, birthday parties and weddings and all that. And actually, when I met my now husband,
congratulations.
Thank you. We met at the end of my final season in baseball, and I just realized that I wasn't going to ever get quality time with him and really like build up a strong relationship. And so that was when I decided I was ready to bow out. I want to have kids, and I want to go down that path. And you can do both, but for me, my priority was having more time to spend with my family and not having to sacrifice.
That's a tough decision, right? Especially when you've thought since you were at San Diego State, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. What parts were easy? What parts were hard? And once you make that decision, how do you go about finding that next job that's outside of sports? Yeah,
I will tell you, it was not an easy decision. My identity was so wrapped up in what I did. And I loved that. I loved being Jill who works in sports, Jill who works in baseball. And so I had to unravel those two. And I had to be Jill and I had to be my occupation. And I couldn't let the two intertwine again. And I almost went through a grieving period, which I don't think enough people talk about when you change careers or paths. I really had to mourn the loss of this life that I lived and shift into this non-glamorous, corporate job that I was taking on. And so that was all really hard, but I knew that was what I wanted. And so getting into a corporate job where it was working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I had nights and weekends off. I wasn't asked to, work extra hours, and it took a minute to calm down and get into the idea of this is all I have to work. I don't have to work 16-hour days. And to be honest, sometimes I still battle that, but it gave me a lot of peace of mind. And so I think once I separated the two and unraveled all that, I was able to accept going into the corporate world.
Let's talk more about PR and how I know and you know that PR is PR, whether you're working in corporate, whether you're working in baseball or sports, but not everyone always thinks that. And I'll hopefully briefly, tell you the story about how, 2020, the entire minor league baseball season got canceled, and the overwhelming majority of people like myself got furloughed. Fortunately for you, you were already out. I was bored. There was only so much time that I could spend watching Netflix and old baseball games on YouTube. And so I remember starting to think, maybe this is my cue. Maybe it's time for me to leave baseball. Maybe it's time for me to come back to San Diego and applying for different jobs. There was one job interview in particular that I had. And at first it was, I don't want to say the employer because I don't want to be mean to the employer, but, I'm back in Southern California. I'm going to work basically 9 to 5. I'm going to make more money. And it started to sound like really exciting to me. I can just be a fan and watch games when I want to. And I finished the interview, and it was a couple days later, and I remember just thinking to myself, I would be so bored with that job that I could do that job in my sleep, and I know that they would like me. And I remember thinking, I just can't do it. I can't leave. I love too much of what I do. And it's different for everyone. Just because this is how I feel doesn't mean that's how Jill should feel. And I always felt like I really enjoyed what I did. And going through the process of thinking about leaving baseball and thinking about leaving broadcasting really helped me realize I don't want to leave. And so I'm actually glad that I went through that process and was able to figure out, okay, this is the life you chose. You had an opportunity to leave. There was this global pandemic that gave you the easy out. You chose to stay, so you better not complain, Josh.
Yeah.
And so, but as I was looking for those jobs, I remember thinking, I know that I can do this because I do these things for my team. I decorate suites. I give tours. I help with our social media. I do corporate sales. There's all these different things. But convincing an employer that I do those things is not easy. So tell us what it was like convincing employers that these PR skills that you have transfer over into their world.
Yeah, and it was tricky at first. I had some people, even after I had my first job outside of baseball, I had people look at my resume and say, oh, the sports threw me off, because people don't understand it. They don't understand what goes into it. They don't understand that people that work in sports are some of the hardest working, most dedicated people that you will ever come across. And so for me, I had to really take a step back and look at my resume, and I wrote down all my skills that I had picked up working in sports, everything that I did, and then found a way to translate that into the jobs that I was applying for. And again, PR skills are very transferable. Communication skills are transferable. And so it was just taking the actual skills and taking the word sports or baseball out of it and applying that towards the industry I was going into. I went into the financial tech sector. I worked for a banking software company right after leaving sports. And so you think those two have nothing to do with each other, but they did. I was still having to come up with stories. I was still having to pitch stories. I was still having to think on my feet and do a lot of the stuff that I was doing in the sports world, just not 16 hours a day or, I was working again with finance instead of baseball.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be taking a quick break right now, and we'll be coming back with more amazing podcasts. This is P. Frank Williams, class of 1993. You can check out my new show, Hip Hop Homicide, streaming on All Black and airing on WeTV. And now, back to the podcast. Here's Josh.
And there's still just as many egos in finance as there is in baseball. Sometimes they're even bigger.
Yep.
Sometimes we take for granted how professional baseball players can be really insecure, especially when they're really close to making the major leagues and also really close to the end of their careers. So in terms of managing egos and working with people from different types of sectors, tell me about how those skills are similar.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you have to just remember that everybody is human. Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. You have to connect with the person. And I think, you talk about egos related to baseball players and going through that. When you get down and you talk to them, a lot of them are insecure. They are shy or introverted or, whatever it may be. And so it's taking the time to sit down and talk to them as a person, not as a baseball player, not as a CEO or an executive. Sitting down and just having a conversation with them person to person and starting to build that level of trust up. And that's the same no matter what industry you're in. You're dealing with people and all of the things that make human beings unique and different.
I think one of the most important things for a PR person, no matter what your industry is just to be around and just to kind of connect with people on things that are not necessarily about that job. So, I remember when you were with Round Rock and I'd see you're down by the batting cage, right? And you're just watching guys take batting practice. And those are just these fun conversations. You never know what people are going to be discussing, especially with whatever music gets played. And so tell us about those types of things, and then what you can do now where you can just build those relationships.
Yeah, you said it. It's just being present. It's being there. It's being around. It's being available. It's knowing that someone can call or text you and say, hey, I need this, or I have this idea or whatever, and you are there to take care of it. Hanging out during batting practice, that was the time when you would hear those little snippets of conversation, and I'd be like, hey, I heard you just talk about you and your family over the winter went on a trip to Hawaii and XYZ happened. Tell me more about that. And then that would become a story I could pitch out to the media.
Yeah.
And it was just because no one's going to come up to you and say, hey, let me tell you all the cool things about my life that you could use for stories.
Right.
You have to sit down and have those conversations and again connect with them one-on-one as human beings and hear those stories and hear those conversations. But it's putting yourself in the situations to be available and open to hearing those stories. It's the same thing in the corporate world, especially as we go to remote first working environments where you're not in an office with everybody. You don't get that water cooler chatter of hearing what's going on with a product launch or hearing what's going on in the engineering department. You have to intentionally reach out and have these conversations with people and check in and just say, hey, what's going on in your world? What are you working on right now? And, for me, I work with engineers a lot now, and I know nothing about engineering. And so I tell them, I need you to break it down for me like I'm 5. I need you to just blankly explain it to me. And having that conversation too is helpful because they know I'm putting an effort to try and understand where they're coming from, and they're giving me helpful information that I can use to then turn around and share with the broader company.
When you work in baseball and there's all these different things that you do, you see the payout. The payout is the game, right? There's somewhere between 3,000 and 12,000 people at this minor league baseball game. There's a giveaway item. There's fireworks. They're watching the game. They're eating this food, and that's the payoff. You see it at the end of the day. When you're working in the corporate world, what are the different things that occur that make you go, that's what I'm doing, that's the payoff for this work that I'm doing?
Yeah, so when I first got out of sports, I was in corporate communications, which was still mainly external communications, some internal communications. And in that space, it was when you got a publication to pick up your story or your pitch, or you got mentioned in a publication. I did a lot of thought leadership writing and ghostwriting. And so whenever my articles would get picked up by industry publications, that was my win. That was, my game time. And now working in internal communications, which I focus on making sure that our employee base is informed and involved. When we do an all-hands meeting and we get immediate feedback that says this was the best all-hands meeting we've ever had, this was really informative, I know what we're doing. When I get that positive feedback, that is my first pitch nirvana. That is like that's the hot spot right there.
You've used the word pitch a number of times to pitch stories. There's an art to pitching stories.
Yes.
Myself, what it's like to receive a really bad email pitch, like a really awful email pitch. What are some of your strategies, your best pieces of advice to people in PR about the best way to pitch a story?
Short and sweet. No one has time to read a novel. It's making sure you know who and what you're pitching. Know who you're pitching, know the journalist, what they tend to cover and the outlet, and then what you're pitching. And make sure you know that you have an angle that this journalist is going to be interested in. You don't need to write a book to them. You just need to say, hey, I am so-and-so with this company, and I saw that you covered this, and I thought that this would be a really great story for you, and then a few bullets as to why it's a good story. Have some numbers, have some stats, have something backs up what you're sending, have someone available to talk, whether that's through email, through phone, video interview, in person. Make sure you have all your ducks in a row of like what you're offering this journalist so that you're making their life easier if they choose to pick up the story. On both sides of the coin, whether you're a journalist or a PR person, we are asked to do so much more with less now. And you look at the state of journalism, and you have multimedia journalists who they are filming their own stories. They are pitching their own stories to their editors. They are editing their stories. They are doing voiceover for them. And then they have to be on camera to write and share the story too. And so as much as you can make that job easier for someone, they are going to go in your favor a little more, and you're going to have a better chance of your story getting picked up because you've made it easy for them to do.
And don't start it off with "Dear Media Member."
Oh gosh, personalization. Also, like, do a little sleuthing.
Right.
The social media is such a fantastic tool for that. Look at their Twitter. What have they been tweeting about? What fired them up recently? Mm-hmm. Hey, it could be a tangent about, I was working in sports. They could go off on a tangent on a movie. And I could say, oh my gosh, I loved your tangent on this. I saw that movie too, and I totally agree. I saw the story that you wrote on this. Here's some, I thought that this would be of interest to you, and here's the information. Yeah. And then it's done. And you've created that relationship right off the bat where you're not coming in to be like, hey, I'm just like sending this out to 500 journalists with no thought behind it. But I have strategically looked you up and found that this is of interest to you, and this would be a good story for you.
You brought up social media, and I'm glad you did, because I almost forgot to ask you about this when it came to working in minor league baseball. So when you worked for Round Rock, I feel like it was a time when social media went from, oh, it's this thing that we need to do, and we're just going to put some stuff out there, and we're really not going to have a plan. And now you better have a plan. You need to have a schedule. You need to know exactly what day and what time and what graphic, and you need to have like a full-on like plan. It's no longer just something that you do for fun. Give us your thoughts on the evolution of social media just within the last 10 years and how important of a tool it has to really be from a scheduling standpoint.
Okay, I'm going to take you back more than 10 years.
Okay.
I'm really aging myself right now. When I was working at XX 1090 when I was in college, I think that was 2007. I started their Facebook page and their Twitter. And those were the only social media platforms really at the time. And I built them up to whatever they were before I left. I started their email newsletter program, and then I went and worked in Huntsville for the Huntsville Stars, and I started their social media programs. And coming to Round Rock, theirs were started, but it was still kind of new. Throughout my career, social media was a second thought. It was like, this is something that we should have, but not something we have to have. And a lot of times it was almost a hindrance for people. They looked at it as, why are we wasting time on that? Mm-hmm. Let's just put something up and not deal with it. And really, when I came to Round Rock was when social media was starting to be looked at as a serious career field, a serious career path for people, and something that needed its own dedicated space. You talked earlier in the interview about major league teams have now split off their social media department from their communications department. At the minor league level, I think we're starting to see that a little bit more, but it still isn't something that there's the resources to have a dedicated social media person. So that often falls on a handful of other people's shoulders. And it's interesting, when you're in the PR role, you are privy to a lot of stuff that even a normal staff member isn't privy to. And that's the stuff, going back to being on the field for batting practice. You're getting these really cool behind the scenes insights that not everybody's privy to. And for you almost get numb to it because you're like, oh, it's part of the job. I see it all the time. And you forget that this is the really cool stuff that fans want to see, that people on the outside looking in, but also parents of players want to see this. Like they get a sneak peek into their kid's life, which is really cool. And so now social media has become this whole extra thing that you have to have a strategy for it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to put thought behind it. You can't just post something and let it go, but you also have to be on top of those trends because they come and go so quickly. And you have these memes that pop up out of nowhere, and you could get such good press coverage off of one funny tweet. But there's, again, like a very fine line. There's a line of staying within your brand voice. There's a line of staying within the values of your organization and adding value to the conversation. You can so easily get called out if you jump in on something that has nothing to do with your industry, or if something comes across in the wrong way. Like, you have to be really strategic about it all.
Yeah, and I think that the strategic element of it these days is what's going to drive ticket sales and what's going to drive merchandise sales and what's going to convince people to attend this youth skills clinic, in addition to, hey, this guy just hit a home run, here's a highlight of it. I feel like there's almost like two different worlds now in terms of, well, this is just something that happened on the field, but what's going to drive traffic to us elsewhere?
No, it's so true. And you talked about this earlier, of how in minor league baseball, you don't get to control the roster. So you can't say, oh, come see this star player tonight, but you may have the coolest merchandise in the league. And so if you're promoting that, people travel to come get your merchandise. They travel for bobbleheads. They travel for giveaways. So you really have this unique thing where you're not running a big commercial nationwide to get attention of these people, but you are posting on social media and you're growing your following nationwide or internationally even based off of your social media. And now people they're buying your merchandise online. They are flying out to or traveling out to your stadium to come to a specific game that they saw promoted, and they want the giveaway or they want to be a part of the promotion. They may be coming to your team's doing hot right now, or your team's on a streak right now. They may be coming out to support the team because of that. But social media, you just have this ability to reach so many more voices for such a low cost.
I'm curious your thoughts on this next topic within this, is that the more that social media becomes prevalent in our lives, the more that I think that what you're doing now becomes almost forgotten. Like this old school PR sense of, hey, I've got this story idea and I'm going to pitch this to someone. I'm going to call them. I'm going to email them. I just have this idea. And I think that especially for college students who don't know a world without social media, that it's just, okay, we've got this and we're going to put it up on these social media platforms and all right, did it, nailed it, and then set back. But really, like, the follow-up behind it. And again, I'm curious your thoughts on, are we losing the old school PR, and what do we need to remember to make sure we don't lose that old school PR?
Yeah, in a sense, I don't know that we're losing it, but it is evolving. Relationships will always be number one. And people need to not lose the art of relationships and forming and fostering relationships. And you can put a tweet out there and it could get picked up by a bunch of national publications. But what are you doing after that? Are you following up with the writers who picked up your tweet and are doing a story on it? Because that is a natural way to form a relationship. And then when you have something else of value to that journalist, you have an easy gateway to hand it to them and hopefully get an extra story about your organization picked up. Social media is great in sending your message out, echoing your message, but you still have to craft a good message and you still have to form those relationships with journalists who are going to pick it up. Because also, if you send a great tweet, I keep saying tweets and I feel like Twitter is not where it's at anymore, but you do a great Instagram post, but your competition does a great one as well. Who's going to get picked up? The person who has the relationship with the journalist is going to get picked up.
Yeah.
So while you may think that you don't need to rely on these relationships with journalists anymore, you very, very much do. And you have to foster them. But social media also makes it so easy to have relationships with journalists. You can follow them on Twitter. You can follow them on Instagram. You can interact with them in ways that you haven't been able to interact with them before. And it makes journalists so much more approachable. And so you still have to put in the effort to form those relationships and cultivate those relationships. But the avenues to do it now, I feel there are more avenues and they're more easily accessible.
I think that any time that someone works in public relations, if they can relate to a member of the media, then it just helps them do their job. And I think this is true in any industry. And one of the things that's interesting about Jill is that she hosted a radio show as well there for a while. And it was two females. You did it on the weekend here in Austin. Tell us about how that idea came to fruition and what you enjoyed about hosting your own radio show.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, especially for the students listening, is don't say no to opportunities just because you're scared of them. Big opportunities get presented, and you have to be open to them. And that's exactly what happened with the radio show. Myself and one of my a former sports reporter in town who's become one of my best friends. She was just one of my bridesmaids. We were approached about doing a sports radio show in Austin, an hour long, and we were going to be the first females to host our own show. And we really had an open run, like open format, whatever we wanted to talk about. And it was so much fun. Again, when you get to sit down with your friends and just banter about sports, it was such a fun weekly thing for us to do. And we were both so heavy in the sports industry at the time. And so it was almost easy for us. We prepped for it every week, but also we could go off the fly and we knew what we were talking about because we did nothing but watch sports. It was a challenge, and there was so much imposter syndrome that kicked in, especially when you have a listener line of people that can text in what they're thinking and feeling, and you get social media comments. And I would say 90% of what we got was really supportive comments. But there were some that you were like, oh gosh, we're bad. We're really bad. We should stop doing this. And then you would sit back and be like, no, we're good. We know what we're talking about. We're good at what we do. And so it was a fun lesson in really putting yourself out there for something that scares you and finding out that you can do it. You can do scary things.
So the name of the show was Our Take. And I'm curious if you intentionally thought we're going to come at this from the perspective of two women, or whether you're like, no, we're just going to come at this from our perspective. Did you consciously think that, and then what ended up happening on the air?
We actually intentionally didn't look at it as being two women giving our perspectives, because of the fact that so many teams would have these women in baseball nights, and it felt like a mansplaining, and we didn't want or need to do that. Our perspective was unique because we are two unique individuals, and we have the unique perspective of working in sports. When you have people that are on a lot of these sports radio shows, they don't work for the teams. And so we had these unique perspectives to share. And also just, I think the fact that we were women was a unique perspective, but we didn't play into that as far as giving our opinions and giving our thoughts. We really just shared what we saw and what we felt about things. And it's funny that you asked this question, because I turned on sports radio for the first time in a while the other day. And I was listening and I was like, you know what? It is truly just people giving their opinions. Nobody has it right, because you can't. You're breaking something down and you're offering your opinion. And at the end of the day, like, what's preventing us from doing that? What was stopping us from doing that? Nothing. Just because we're women, like, we have as much of a valid opinion as anybody else.
Especially when those opinions are so wrong so often on sports radio.
Yes.
I mean, oh, you're wrong. Yes. We're recording this after day one of the NFL draft, and that is the prime example of like freezing cold takes of people who think they know what they're talking about. And whether you've been watching football for one day or 100 years, you're going to be wrong.
Yes.
And there's so much of that on Sports Talk Radio.
And it's okay to be wrong. It is totally okay to be wrong. And it's okay to believe in your opinion so steadfastly and you defend it and you're wrong. And that's totally fine. Like, that is the joy of it, is that you're an entertainer. Mm-hmm. Nobody is paying you to come on and be right about everything. They're paying you to entertain. Mm-hmm. So sometimes even you say stuff that you're like, oh, I don't fully, agree with this, but I'm going to take this take because it's going to fire people up. And, and it's entertainment at the end of the day.
I'm so grateful that I got to work with Ken Levine when we co-hosted Dodger Talk together, because Ken truly understood that this is theater of the mind on radio, that this is about entertaining. And, I had just made the transition from print journalist to radio, and I remember thinking, I had imposter syndrome. I really just want to be, no, I'm the journalist. I'm Edward R. Murrow here as I'm doing post-game Dodger Talk. And I learned from watching Ken, like, no, we can still inform and do it in an extremely educational or not educational way, but in a very informative way that's entertaining. And Ken came in from the perspective of someone, who wrote Cheers and Mary Tyler Moore and Becker and wrote MASH. And so he just has this comedic mind where everything for him, he instantly goes to the comedy, whereas I'm instantly going to like, well, what's someone's weighted batting average as a result of this? And it made for good radio because we came at it from two different perspectives. And again, I'm just so grateful that I learned from him about how you can inform but also entertain when you're on the radio.
Yeah, and it's so important. And you listen to just radio shows in the morning now, on your drive in, and you're like, oh, this is theatrical. It is a bit. It is a play. And not to say that sports radio is all of that, because there are definitely like facts and takes and all that provided. But at the end of the day, you have to entertain people and you have to have fun with it. And you're going to be wrong, whether you're on the radio, whether you are sending out a press release, whether you are sending something internally. Like, you're going to make mistakes. It happens. Learn from them, move on.
Let's go back in time. San Diego State, when you were a student, tell me about some of your just most cherished memories of classes or professors or activities, or just what was it like being a student at San Diego State for Joe Cacic?
Looking back, I feel like I really looked back a lot during SDSU's recent run to the NCAA championship. I wish I would have stopped and soaked it all in a little more. And it's tough to say that after the fact. I feel like I was rushing to get through school to start my career. And I wish I would have slowed down a little bit and enjoyed just being a college student. Mm-hmm. I loved my time at San Diego State. I met some of my best friends. It started my career. I learned so much. The JMS school is just incredible. I had Dr. Shaw. She was one of my favorite professors. I know she's now moved on to a couple different schools. But the teachers there and the quality of education that you get was so fantastic. I have college textbooks still to this day in my office that I reference. I probably need to update them. But it's just the information that they taught was so valuable and so useful in real life. I can't stress enough about getting internships and getting real life experience, because I think it's the mashup of those two that really set you out for success. But the education that I received at San Diego State was truly incredible. It helped me be ready to jump into my career.
Were you on the 4-year plan or the 5-year plan or the 6-year plan, or?
I was on the 3.5-year plan.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness.
It was really like 3.75, because my last semester I had, I think, one class, but.
How do you do that nowadays? I was on the 5-year plan, and it was very, very close to the 6-year plan. And most of my closest friends were on the 6 to 7-year plan.
Looking back, I would have loved to have done that. My parents were cutting me off after 4, so I had a hard stop. No, you know what? In high school, I took a bunch of
college classes.
Yeah, like the prereq classes.
Okay.
I was really bad at math, so I took math classes at my local junior college over the summer, so I could be done with them. So I just took a handful of classes
smart.
like that. So yeah, so when it got time to go to school, I really was able to focus on the things that I enjoyed doing. I was able to take a few extracurriculars like surfing and wakeboarding and all the fun stuff that San Diego State offers, because I had the time opened up, because I had taken the stuff that I didn't like ahead of time.
Wow. I'm really impressed. Yeah, because I was definitely not done in 3 3/4 years, and I wanted to take surfing, but I just couldn't motivate myself to get into the cold water at 6 a.m. in Mission Bay in order to do so.
Yeah.
But I will say that, one of the things, I agree with you about how the Final Four, just being around so many friends from college where, we all met in Houston and got to hang out, and, you can't help but reflect about how terrible the basketball team used to be and then how incredible it is now. And actually, the one thing that I am proud of is that I did stop and enjoy it. I remember there's times like, okay, I got an hour between classes. I'm just going to go sit here on the quad, and I'm just going to maybe read this book that I should be reading. But really, I'm just going to enjoy people watching, all these fun people who are walking by me as I just hang out on the quad here at beautiful San Diego State.
Yeah, and I looking back, I think my social anxiety, I'm oddly a very introverted person, and I think my social anxiety stopped with me doing some of those things. And it's like, at the end of the day, nobody's paying attention to you. They're all in their own bubble, in their own world. Like, do your thing. Stop and enjoy it. Stop and see the turtles in the turtle pond.
I love the turtles. Oh, I want to see the turtles in the turtle pond right now. Okay, so one of the things that we like to do on this Where You At podcast is brag about other people from San Diego State who are making us proud. And it doesn't matter if they're older than us or younger than us, if we know them, if we don't know them. Preferably it's something within communications, but we just like to brag about the number of different SDSU alums who are doing things that we appreciate and we enjoy. So the floor is yours, Jill. Who would you like to brag about?
Mine is one of my dear friends, actually, Victoria Valencia. She interned with me at San Diego State's athletic department. She's the one that got me into the internship there, and she is now working for the NFL and crushing it there. Yeah, she's doing really big things there. So she's in the in their finance department now, but she works for the Super Bowl doing credentials, and she does a lot of media relations help for their big events now.
Okay.
Because she has that background.
Am I hearing a hookup for the Super Bowl? Is that what I just heard? Did I just hear a hookup for a Super Bowl?
I've been trying for years, and it has not worked so far. Maybe this will be the thing that puts me over the edge now.
Okay. For my alum that I'm going to brag about, I'm actually going to brag about two because, so again, we're recording this. We're in Round Rock, Texas. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes from Houston. And the Aztec gods were just completely aligned in my favor because my baseball team opened the season here in Round Rock. We played opening night was on a Friday. Saturday was the night of the national semifinal. And what we talked about before about like work-life balance, I admit that 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, I can't do it. I got a game. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, what do you mean? You're less than 3 hours away. You can take a day off. It's all right. And fortunately, my boss, John Traub, was great. And he said, take the day off. So we just used the Round Rock broadcasters feed that day instead. I went down to watch the semifinal game. My friend, Ferris Sheristani, one of my best friends, we met at the Daily Aztec. He hosted a whole bunch of us. He continues to give me some grief because I've referenced him twice about his house and him hosting, but I did not mention him by name. So for Ferris and his wife Shay and his daughter Layla, especially for Shay and Layla, who took in all of his college friends as we crashed their place for the weekend extended, that was awesome. And then drove back after the semifinal for the Sunday game that was here in Round Rock, and then drove right back on right after the game for the Monday national championship game. And another SDSU connection here in Round Rock is that the Albuquerque Isotopes infield coach is a guy by the name of Bobby Meacham. Meacham played baseball at San Diego State. In fact, Bobby Meacham is the reason why Tony Gwynn played baseball. When Tony Gwynn went to San Diego State, his first year he only played basketball. But Bobby Meacham knew him from playing baseball against him in the summer. And Bobby gets to campus and he's like, Tony, you have to play baseball. And Tony just wanted to make it to the NBA. And the basketball coach didn't want him to play both. And then the basketball coach got fired. And Bobby Meacham's like, yo, Tony, you got to play both. And because there was a new basketball coach who came in, he allowed Tony to play baseball after basketball season was over. Jim Dietz was smart enough to realize, I don't care if I get Tony Gwynn for 1 day or 1 month or half a season. And the rest is history. Tony actually got drafted by the San Diego Clippers before they became the LA Clippers. And he got drafted by the San Diego Padres in the same week. But I don't know if he would have ever played baseball if it wasn't for Bobby Meacham. And he's now a coach with the Isotopes, and so shout out to Bobby Meacham. Imagine a world in which Tony Gwynn was not Mr. Padre because they didn't allow him to play baseball.
It is insane to think about one thing like that could have thrown off the trajectory of his whole career.
Yeah. And Meacham's great. His wife has a podcast. She's in town, and I just got to meet her the other day. So a legendary alum for what he did on the field and what he did in the major leagues, Bobby Meacham, but most known for how he gave us the gift of Tony Gwynn on a baseball field.
And what a gift.
Yes.
I will say one of my favorite memories at San Diego State was running into Tony on campus just randomly. I lived behind the baseball stadium, and so you would be driving back there, and he'd be crossing the street just like it was nothing. And I'm like, gosh, royalty is on campus, just crossing in front. It was just the coolest thing.
Yeah. Oh, love you, Tony. We miss you.
Yes.
All right, Jill. This was so much fun. Thank you for braving the traffic from Austin to Round Rock and coming back to your old stomping ground so I can do this podcast in person.
This was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
All right. That is Jill Cacic. I'm your host, Josh Suchon. If you want to get in touch with Jill, use your journalism skills, reach out to her. I know that she will be happy to talk about her experiences working in sports, her experiences not working in sports, and help guide anybody who's thinking about making a transition, whether you're a student or whether you are an alum and you're thinking of making the transition. We like to remind people, get involved in the university. You can contact me, Temple Northrup, any of the professors, mentor, give back, donate money. You can talk to students via Zoom. If you got an internship, if you want to hire some SDSU alums, then get after it and help continue to grow our wonderful school and our wonderful department. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. This is the Where You At podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where you at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!